He's a full-time.
That was epic. Oh, so good. You got to give credit. Look, even if you're on Paul's side on this, you got to give credit. Well done with his weird spaghetti hair. What is it with Kentucky politicians? He and Thomas Massey with that whole doopity-doo. I don't know what's happening there. I don't know. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. It feels like it's been a minute. It's probably because last week, I think I had 3 guests. I know I had at least 2. I don't even remember anymore. I had at least 2. I had at least 2. It's been a minute since it's been just mano a mano, or I guess in some cases mano a womano, depending on how you identify. but no, it's not how you identify. It's depending on your genetics. But yes, tonight it's just you and me. I have a goal up there. I have a goal where I know I made an hour. That we will have a 3-hour show tonight if we hit our goal, which is 10 yellows in a span of 15 yellows, which is $10 super chats or more within 1 hour. We can definitely do this. And that if we hit that goal, I will do 3 hours. You asked me, Joe, why are you only giving us 1 hour to get this done? Why? Why are you giving us 1 hour to get this done? A couple of reasons. First and foremost, it's the end of the month. So yeah, I'd rather have this. I'd rather front load. Not going to kid you. I'd rather front load. But really, it's also that as far as how much time I focus, because I have 3 main topics I plan on hitting on tonight, and how much time I end up giving to each segment will basically. Some of these are juicy that I can spend longer time on, or I could try to pack it in. And I need to know in the first hour, basically, as far as scheduling what I'm doing tonight. So as far as keeping it real with you all, if I know in the first hour whether or not we're going to hit that goal, it makes it easier for me to actually do the show in a way that's probably more enjoyable for everyone. So I'm going to share with you, beyond that song, I want to share with you something that you may recall seeing. This is not nearly as entertaining. This is actually, what I'm about to share with you now is somewhat revolting, although not as revolting as a letter that I got in the mail, which I did get a letter in the mail that was revolting. But from someone who I assume saw me on Owen Schroyer and basically claimed that he was a victim of Diddy and wrote me a handwritten note. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. But basically asking me to call it to Owen's attention, which I'll tell you now, I'm not doing. And included a picture, which was none of his stuff I can actually read to you or share with you. I hate to do that. I can't. It's everything about this correspondence was X-rated. I wouldn't even want to read it out loud. I would be revolted to just read out loud the descriptive nature of what he puts in this letter. And the picture, too, is horrifying. Well, it's not horrifying. It's just pornographic. So I guess I found it revolting. It's been a weird weekend. I don't know what to tell you. It's been a weird weekend. I hope yours is going well. And yeah, who sends snail mail? Okay, this is the envelope. Who sends? This is what I got here. Who said? Is someone sending me snail mail here? No, I didn't dox myself. Who does that? What is this? What is this? I don't even know what that is. Look at the name on this. When I was trying to cut this thing open, it was sealed so tight. I had to get a knife out to get this thing open. So yeah, I'm not making it up. Someone sent me snail mail. Anyway, but let's moderately. It's kind of a toss-up whether this was more revolting than what I'm about to share with you now, but this is certainly a lot more kosher from the perspective of YouTube. In fact, I'm sure they wish I'd show you more of this. There's a reason I'm showing this, and you may have seen it before. I think it was in the Super Bowl. I'm not sure. But this is a commercial for Jaguar. I think I shared this on the screen on the show at one point. This weirdo commercial for Jaguar, which came out like 4 or 6 months ago. I don't know. You guys remember this? You remember this? Do you remember it? Y'all remember this, right? You know how that advertising campaign has gone? You want to hear how that's been going? Yes. Jaguar's sales collapsed by 98%. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that a whole bunch of like college kids don't have enough money to afford a Jaguar? Wow. Yes. That's well said, Ben. Jaguar. 98%. They normally sell like they average selling in this quarter like I think 1,167 cars, and they sold 49. 97.5%. So yeah, that's the claim of 98% sales drop for Jaguar in April 2025 is nearly accurate. Data showing a 97.5% decline. Oh my God. Oh wow. That is so awesome. Because you have to realize some people were probably all excited about getting a Jaguar. Some people like in March were probably all excited. That commercial comes out and they're just like, oh no. Oh no. No, 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 no. So yeah. Shop it's an all electric lineup by 2025. Yeah, you think that's what it is? Not solely the rebranding. Yeah, okay. 98%. Awesome. Yes, this is the way. This is the way. Indeed it is. All right, so I wanted to share that with you. I'll give you some good stuff about Senator Paul Rand, something good that he's doing. Because look, he's not. You might agree with him, you might disagree with him, and some of you who are watching you're more likely to be fiscally conservative than, let's say, a random group of people in the street, which I was polled today. That's how I spend part of my day. 15 minutes, and I had another call, and I had to let them go. But that was like a work call. But yeah, I was polled today. I was very, very honest in everything about the poll, except for one question where they asked me what my demographic was, and I said African American. I think I might have said I voted for Kamala too. I think I might have done that. It's possible. It's possible. But the rest of it was basically what utter trash the Democrats were. Anyhow, so and yeah, and the framing and the nature of the questions that they gave me, I started laughing. I was like, which idiots put together this poll for you? And I'm not faulting you. You're just reading from a script there. Some of the questions I was getting was, which of these problems, which of these do you think is the biggest problem with Trump's deportation policies? It's immoral. It's going to cost us too much money, or it's racist. And I was just like, what? He said, which of these is the biggest of the problems with Trump's deportation policies. It's immoral, it's expensive, or it's racist. And I was just like, I said, you basically just asked me if I would rather force myself upon a puppy or a cactus. It's no, none of the above. Where's the none of the above answer? I don't know where that is. Where's the none of the above answer? Yeah. He's like, you have to sort of pick. No, I'm not picking one. I'm not picking any. He's like, all right, refuse to answer. All right. Well, anyway, we're talking about Rand Paul. I was talking about Rand Paul. And I wanted to share with you how Rand. That was actually something that I said. I said the biggest problem is it's not fast enough. That's the biggest problem. I actually said that. I was like, where's your none of above? It was one question after another like that. I was just like, I don't know who the idiots are that did this, but I'm very happy I claimed to be a Black Kamala voter. So this way you can basically take a lesson that all your policies, you can take from me that your policies are not helping you. And get the heck out of the way. So this is what I want to share with you, good things that Rand Paul is doing. Senator Rand Paul is preparing to subpoena Dr. Fauci to testify about his role in COVID-19. Since Fauci accepted a pardon from Biden, he's not allowed to plead the fifth in this instance. It's a question whether you have to accept it, but it's been foisted upon him. And if he lies under oath, he can be arrested for perjury. Fauci is sweating tonight, as reported by Nick Sorter. So this is good work. This is something we all can get behind, get excited about, hold this guy accountable. The reason he's afraid of being held accountable is because I'm sure one question is going to be, did you invent it? Or something exceptionally similar? Did you invent anything that's exceptionally similar to COVID, to any of the forms of COVID-19 that the world that was unleashed throughout the world? I'm not giving you any medical advice. There's no medical advice on this show, but now we're just speculating. We're theorizing about origins and yeah. So that's something good. That's something we should be excited about. I'm gonna take a good note from that. I'm calling that a win. I'm not doing that. Okay, Dog Dick? I'm not doing that. All right. Let's talk about Brian Kohberger. You guys might remember from the Idaho 4, right? From the Idaho 4? That Brian Kohberger was a suspect charged with killing the Idaho 4. Idaho 4 that are in that picture, which I have on my thumbnail there. Everyone was talking about this story, and he was identified because of his car and all this other stuff. Well, as his trial is inching closer, it seems he's on the verge, if he's not already accepted, a plea deal where he would be pleading to have a life sentence without the possibility of parole, what they call a toe tagger case, and we'll get to that in a moment, in exchange for having death penalty taken and also be surrendering the right to appeal, assuming that that's surrenderable, and that he would basically spend the rest of his life in prison. And I have questions for you. Are you bothered by this? Are you bothered by the notion of him accepting a plea deal which results in him spending the rest of his life behind bars? No death penalty, rest of his life behind bars. Do you have a problem with that? As reported here by Fox News.
Breaking tonight, the suspect in the Idaho student murders case, Brian Kohberger, has reached a plea deal. and will plead guilty. National correspondent Jeff Paul has the latest. Jeff, what do we know so far?
Well, yeah, Brett, jury selection was supposed to start in August, but now that obviously goes away with this development. According to FoxNews.com, Brian Kohberger has accepted a plea to...
And while it wouldn't really have any distinction for life sentences, the idea is that none of the families of any of the victims should feel denied justice because each of them is an extra life sentence for each of them. I think that's what they said.
To spare his life in exchange for a guilty plea for all 4 murders involving the University of Idaho students who were killed. We know the families of all 4 victims who were killed are aware and are being kept in the loop regarding this plea deal. But according to the Kaylee Gonclave's family Facebook page, they say it's true. They are beyond furious at the state of Idaho, saying they failed us. Now, Kohberger was accused of fatally stabbing 4 University of Idaho students back in November of 2022. They were Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonclaves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. You see them there right on your screen. The killing stunned the small community of Moscow, Idaho, where the murder there hadn't taken place since 2015. Investigators said at the time the killer had entered a house where the group of students lived. 2 surviving roommates had returned home later at that house to find the scene. Kohberger came into the picture after investigators received hundreds of tips, one of them being a particular car that had been seen at that house through security camera footage. Eventually, their investigation led them to Brian Kohberger, a 28-year-old criminology student at Washington State University. Police were able to track his phone heading to Moscow before the attack. Now, obviously, with this plea deal, it does really 2 things. It guarantees a guilty verdict and that Kohberger will spend the rest of his life in prison, but it also relieves the family and the community of what was expected, Brett, to be a very, very lengthy trial. Brett?
Okay, Jeff, thank you.
So, how do you guys feel about this? Do you think the families are obviously upset?
We are over.
They're obviously upset. I don't. So first and foremost, do you think that should be a factor? That the families are upset if they don't want you to do it, and what if some want you to do it and some don't? Like maybe they. I mean, I'm sure. Let's assume that part of the plea deal is allocution, which means that Brian would stand up there and express, his guilt, and let's say be compelled to explain what he did. And the other thing would be included is the families of the victims having an opportunity to address him before his sentencing. Let's assume that is all there. Okay? So we sometimes see that when there's a sentencing, that family members will get up there and urge the judge to issue a harsh sentence against someone who has been found guilty of a heinous crime. And they'll get up there, and usually it's a very moving thing listening to them berate the defendant for the horror that they visited upon a loved one of theirs. And I think that it likely helps provide some sort of closure to the family to be able to say that in public to the defendant. So let's assume that is afforded to the family members. Do you think that this is denying them justice in some level, that he's not going to be put to death? You're taking death off the table. And do you think that they should be a factor in this whole thing? Here's a woman who is very outraged by this possibility, or what seems like everything has to ultimately be approved by the court. The court could reject it if they were so inclined, even if both sides agree to it. But here's a woman who seems to be very bothered by it. This is her name is Ashley, TV Ashley. I don't know who is she. Drop Dead Serious podcast. Okay. All right, so there you go. We've been enjoying this so much. No Saturday, no Sunday. We need to communicate better. I need you. Your sounds like a letter I got this weekend. Oh my god! It was a dude, by the way, who sent it. In case you're wondering, this letter here. In case Lady Lawgic is watching, which she may be. This was a dude who went by the name Ramrod. And that was like the cleanest part of his entire letter. So this is what we this is what she says as far as why she's bothered by this plea deal.
It's not like I haven't seen this before. I am not going to lie. I did not expect this. Brian Kohberger has been offered a plea deal, and News Nation has learned that he's accepted a plea deal. This deal takes death off the table as long as he agrees to spend the rest of his natural life in prison with no possibility to get out on parole. That's also known as toe tag parole, colloquially. Means you're not getting out unless there's a tag on your toe. The other thing that he has to waive is the right to appeal. So, bye-bye, is basically what this plea deal is. Here's why I'm surprised. Not shocked, but I'm surprised. Because I felt that the government had him dead to rights. I really did. I felt like the government had so much evidence on this guy, and everything that everybody's debated has just been academic. It's been small. Yeah, you get the OJ verdict every so often, right? But when you've got a slam dunk, typically you got a slam dunk. And I know that the people of Idaho, many of them, wanted a death penalty for a crime of this magnitude.
Slam dunk? Slam dunk, you say? Slam dunk? Really? Look, I've been following this case somewhat. I haven't really looked at it very much in the last year or so, but I've been following it somewhat. I check out other podcasts sometimes talking about this case. I don't know where you think that they had a slam dunk with so much evidence. I'll get to that in a moment.
And so for Idaho to have yielded, there's another reason as to why they might. And that is cost. It is expensive.
That's very presumptuous. That's a very presumptuous accusation.
It is expensive to hold a trial like this. It is expensive to sentence someone to death because it's not just this trial. It's all the appeals. It's the 20 to 30 years sometimes that it takes to actually execute someone. It's not instantaneous. There's only one Timothy McVeigh that I can think of in my 40-year career, and he just didn't want to sit in prison very long, so he waived most of his appeals. He was not allowed to waive one of his appeals. It was a mandatory appeal. He would have waived that one too. But so there you go. There you go. And here's the one thing I'm upset about. A couple things. I know that Kaylee Gonzalez's family really wanted a death penalty. I know that the other families, it wasn't as important to some of them. Didn't bring their kids back. But the details of what the hell happened, that's something that I would really like to know. And the government knows some details and kept them under a gag order for this last 2.5 years. And I expect that Brian Kohberger will have to do an allocution in court in order to accept this plea bargain. He'll have to say a few things, right? He'll have to stand up in court and say some things. So
you would hope that's part of the deal here.
It remains to be seen just how much we're going to learn. But I am so sorry. I am very sorry that that justice won't feel like justice for some people, certainly for families. They'll never feel whole. They'll never get closure. But I am sorry for many of you who really wanted to see justice play out.
So my question is this justice playing out or not? That's what I want to hear from you guys. Is this justice playing out? Because, okay, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First and foremost, there's no eyewitness to any of the murders. There's not even really an eyewitness that seems reliable placing him in the house. There's all sorts of questions as far as like whether evidence may be thrown out. I'm not surprised at the state offering it. I'm more surprised about the defendant accepting it. She portrays this as if this is something that, like, obviously they were going to get the death penalty, like they were going to get conviction and death penalty. And I don't know where she's coming from. I don't even understand it. I don't understand how you can come to that conclusion. How does anyone come to that conclusion? It's always a roll of the dice. Now, in this situation, you have a scenario where you can expect that the jury pool is likely looking to hang the guy. You can call that a positive or a negative, depending on your feelings about, fair justice versus, let's get this guy. Depending on how high you're raising that pitchfork or that torch. I was starting to question whether or not this guy did it. Whether they really got the right guy. I mean, they were really desperate to get somebody. You had one survivor of the incident said she opened the door and she sort of saw bushy eyebrows, which I think that's one fair description. But she didn't call the police till the next day. You question whether she was, there was a party going on that night, how lucid she was. So did I miss that there was some sort of, because when I saw the indictment, I was like, there's a lot of holes that a savvy defense counsel, which I assume he has, a savvy defense counsel could really poke in this thing. With between the pinging and stuff everything here was it was very, I'm not saying that they were wrong to indict the guy. I'm simply saying you have no witnesses. I don't even know. Did they find his DNA at the scene? Was there any? Is there any evidence he's been inside the house, aside from one witness who? Look, I'm not trying to blame this witness. We've all been to parties. We all have gotten some level of intoxication or cloudiness due to imbibing, inhaling, smoking, shooting up, whatever. We've all had levels of lack of clarity. She had no reason to think she's going to be an essential figure in identifying who's going to be murdering her roommates. So I'm not faulting her at all if she was somewhat cloudy. That's natural and normal for, a college girl. I think it was on the weekend, as I recall, at a party. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But that also means that ultimately her testimony is probably able to be shaken a little bit. And if she's the only thing that's putting him there, definitively, and you're relying on her ID, she doesn't call till the next day. Rather than, which is, the defense is going to make a big stink about that. You didn't think he had just killed your friends, or he's about to kill your friends, did you? Otherwise, you would have called the police, wouldn't you have? That's what, any defense attorney would be asking her. Not to mention all the aggravation. And then even if you get a conviction, you don't know that you're going to get the death penalty. And then even if you get the death penalty, you can have appeal after appeal after appeal. This guy likely would have another 20 years easy on average before he would be put to death. So someone walk me through here. I don't understand how this is anything other short of justice, assuming he's willing to accept it, assuming he really did it, which, if he's pleading out to a life sentence, he likely did it. I still don't know for sure. It could be he just feels like he has no chance of getting out of it. But let's assume that God justice is that he really did it. So now he's spending the rest of his life behind bars. So he's not going to get the death penalty. In what way is justice being cheated here by having him spend the rest of his life rotting in a cell? Okay, so let's assume that. Okay, my point is sometimes people will plead guilty because they feel like they're going to lose, and he could be that he felt maybe that that there's just a mob that's waiting to convict him. That's possible. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm simply saying if in fact they had gotten the wrong guy, let's assume for a second they did get the wrong guy. There's no video of this guy doing it. There's no witness to him actually committing the act upon any act in that other than walking in the house. And that's with a shaky ID. So you tell me, let's assume for a second that they did get the wrong guy. Now you're standing there as the defendant, and your lawyer is telling you you have like 100 million people or more who want to see you fry. And we got to expect that some of them are going to be in the jury. And will slip past us. Who are going to want to see you hanged till you're dead. So now, so you would plead guilty. And again, I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm not saying that he didn't do it. I'm simply saying, is it not possible that someone would plead guilty and say that they'll spend the rest of their life in prison rather than feel like they won't get a fair shake, and even if they are innocent, say plead guilty? I mean, that's definitely a possibility. Kimmy says, 4th chemo today. 2 more to go. Extensive radiation for 2 more weeks, Monday through Friday. Then they go to 4 to 5 INT radiation placed with anesthesia. 4 to 5 intervals of radiation placed with anesthesia. No energy. Living alone, tough. I like to call in some night. I have to hire help. So this gives me an opportunity to remind you all that Kimmy is a longtime viewer of the show, based as hell, awesome young woman who's obviously dealing with very difficult cancer that, God willing, I'm very confident she's going to beat. But she is dealing with those expenses, and now part of those expenses are that she is going to have to hire live-in help. And it's givesendgo.com. I'll tell you right now, it's givesendgo.com/Kimmy Guy. I'm going to put the link in the description. And I want to remind you all, and I'll come back to the Brian Kohberger thing in a moment, but this is something that to the extent we can help Kimmy out, I'd really love to do that. I've donated, and I urge any of you who are able to help to kick in as well. Trying to help Kimmy fight cancer with strength and grace. And givesendgo.com/Kimmy Guy /donate. And yeah. So if you can help her out and do anything to help her, that would be amazing. And God will certainly bless you. So what she's saying is that she's going to have to hire help. And obviously, that's difficult. So I'm going to put this in the description and in chat. So if I can help get her an extra $5, or hopefully a lot more than that, I feel like I'm doing something good. So first, let me put this. I'm going to put it below the description above my links. So to donate to Kim. Cancer. All right. Copy. Save. It's there now. put it in the chat. See. And drop it in Rumble as well. There you go. And you go, Kimmy. Kick cancer's ass. If he got the Karen Reed judge, he might become the next governor of the state. True. That was Karen Reed judge. Beverly Canoni is pretty bad. His DNA found on the knife sheath snap left on bed. Right. I forgot about that. The knife sheath snap left on the bed. And that's an important factor. Without that, I don't think we'd have anything. A partial idea of a guy's bushy eyes, you'd have nothing. So that's definitely something. That's definitely, significant to have it on what you think is part or an accessory to the murder weapon. That's definitely significant. But still, you don't know what's going to end up happening when you go to a jury. This is the women of the college's fault. If one of them hadn't taken one for the team and given Brian a little, the murderers wouldn't have happened, in my opinion. Could be. Remember, for 19 months. It could be, but I'm simply saying I don't look at this as I think that's a very harsh assessment that this woman gave there. I think it's a very harsh assessment. This woman here, TV Ashley, I think she gave a very harsh assessment by implying that this is the state trying to save money. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's not like we have video of the murder. It's not like we have a witness to the murder or any of the murders. And the DNA is definitely very, very helpful. Without the DNA, you have nothing. I don't think he'd plead out. But if he was with a friend that night, who had his knife, I'm simply saying if they threw that possibility out there, if the defense raised the specter of, so who else was in the car with him? Oh, you don't know. Oh, okay. So he might have had a murderer in the car with him. Murderer goes into the house with Brian Kohberger's knife and does all this stuff. And all we have is this woman who saw him in the hallway. Says she saw. What I'm saying is there's a lot that can be poked at this. If you're the defense attorney, there's a lot you can poke at this. I can understand the state saying, oh my God, if this guy somehow ends up walking, what terrible pain that would be for these families. As opposed to slam the hammer, slam the bars shut behind him, and make sure he can never leave. I understand it. And I don't think this is if they had pled down to 10 years or something like that, then I'd be like, what the hell? What's going on here? But when that's not what happened here. When the situation is that they actually really fought to try, when they're putting him away for the rest of his life, which is something that could happen even if he was convicted. Even if convicted, you don't know that you're not going to get that this judge is not someone who's going to be like, I don't like sentencing people to death. That could happen. So they're going to spend the rest of their life behind bars. There are a lot of people who have issues with the death penalty. So if you get a judge like that, and he's like, I think you're a monster, and I think you need to spend the rest of your days in a prison cell, and I'm not going to cut those days short, then we're back here. Where then everyone's like, well, we could have saved ourselves a whole trial and just had this plea deal. So I don't think that this is, especially now, and plus he's stripped of the opportunity of appealing, which means that in many ways this deal is better than a conviction and a judge sentencing him to life in prison, because that could be appealed in a myriad of ways if there's a screw up by the state in the way they go through and acquire that conviction. All right. Let's move along. Let's move along from one monster to another. From one monster to another. And that is, there's an incident that happened yesterday with a suspect in Idaho. Well, there's a man by the name of Wes Rowley who spent some time. It took some time for the police to catch this guy, but as you're likely aware, probably I would assume 97% of you, but maybe not 100% of you, are aware that yesterday, also in Idaho, there was a 20-year-old man by the name of Wes Rowley who took a gun, went into the mountains, set some fires, and then started shooting firefighters when he got up there. The death toll, as I understand, ended up hitting 4, with I think a dozen injured, at least 11 injured. And here's a shocking, his name is Wes Rowley. They ended up killing him in the firefight. It took several hours before they ended up killing this guy. Such psychopathy. Psychopathy is horrible. But here's the interesting little tidbit. Everyone was talking about how he had sniper rifle and that he was shooting people from really far away. Not so.
Sheriff, can you describe the weapon that you found next to?
It appears right now we have a shotgun that was used, but we're still processing the scene.
So obviously a shotgun is not a sniper weapon.
Correct.
Do you know what kind of weapon that was?
Well, we're still processing the scene, but let me kind of set the scene for everybody. When you're in a rural area and you're heavily treed, heavily brushed, and when you're taking fire, then it just adds a whole different dynamic to the situation. So what was reported by people on scene, by peace officers on scene, that they believed they were taking sniper fire.
True.
Yes. And then that's where that is. Lady in the black.
I don't understand how that's possible. Look, I got 1,300 people watching me right now, and probably 1,200 guns better than I do. So I'm certainly not going to hold myself as some sort of expert when it comes to assessing munitions. My first gut would be this: A, it's definitely a shotgun. Even I've played enough PUBG to know that ain't no sniper rifle. I don't even understand how the injuries that you wouldn't see that some people have. I would think the injuries would look really different. And the guy has to be at really close range. I don't even understand it. It's possible that he had multiple weapons and one of them was a sniper rifle. And they located a shotgun, which was a second gun he had with him, and then he was planning on using that shotgun if in fact anyone got close enough to him that it would become a viable weapon of choice. And that the people who were injured were actually injured by a sniper rifle rather. This is obviously speculative at this point. The other thing people are speculating about is his background, and because the first thing everyone wants to know is, who is this guy? How does he come to do something like this? Where is he coming from? And I'll just give you the heads up that what everyone is saying about him is that he is his parents are both MAGA. This is the picture, supposedly, of his parents. There you go. That is Wes Rowley's parents. They're divorced and have been for a while. I think for like 10 years now. Although obviously this picture was within the last year if you're wearing a black MAGA hat. But so this obviously gets idiots on the left all excited to think that he's a big MAGA guy. I saw this and the first thing I thought was, yeah, this is a guy who obviously is a victim of leftist indoctrination. That's the first thing, really the first thing I thought. Yeah. To proof that our education system indoctrinates leftism too often to the point of psychopathy. I'm using that word a lot today. Need I say more? Yeah, you need to say a lot more. Why? How many 20-year-olds are following in their parents' footsteps? Not very common. Not very common. But I was covering this story, and I do want to credit the coverage that was done by the police. So this was a threat that when this was ongoing, I was on X Space from pretty early into it, like an hour into it. And it took them several hours before they were able to neutralize the threat. And there was talk at around 5 p.m. local time, 8 p.m. my time, because this is Pacific time. There was talk that this was going to take several days potentially to neutralize this guy. Now, maybe he ended up self-inflicting. That's possible. But one way or another, this was brought to a close much faster than they thought it was going to be. And the speculation is that he was setting these fires for the purpose of baiting firefighters to the mountain just so he could shoot firefighters. The other reports that they're saying is that he had applied to be a firefighter and had been denied or something of that nature. Oh, that's his stepfather and mom, not his bio dad. So you're saying he might be a wacko dad? Could be. That would explain why they're there in the picture together. We're still in the early phase here, Dom Mannion. What do you want from me? What should I do? What would you have me do? I'm not going to be misleading people. What do you want from me? I'm just telling you what we got so far. Uzanian says, yes, there was found there. Let's see what we got. Oh, this is talking about Brian Kohberger saying the DNA matches evidence found at Idaho murder scene, according to court docs. All right. So, yeah, I think that's how you get to a plea deal, right? You still don't have any witnesses. You still don't have any witnesses at all. So, anyway. But you guys are my gun experts, so you tell me. It can't be that it was a shotgun that he was using to kill 4 people, right? I mean, that cannot be. There has to be a second gun. They would know. Wouldn't they know? Wouldn't they see all sorts of... Wouldn't the injured people... I understand it could be echoing from the reports, but how I don't understand how that gets confused. And yeah, in the distance. The distance makes no sense to me either. I see. It could be a shotgun from a good distance. Okay, Jano, I'm just going to say, coming back to Kohberger here, I'm not saying they couldn't get a conviction. I'm simply saying, referring this as a slam dunk when there's no eyewitness to any of the murders. And you're relying on DNA to put him in the house, when in fact, he could have been with the killer that night, and the killer used his knife. You need to get proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Do I think he did it? Yes, I think he did it. Yes, I do. Don't get this all muddled where it's like, oh, Joe says Brian Kohberger is innocent. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm simply saying that it's not a slam dunk case that people are trying to make it out to be. When you don't have any eyewitness, there's no video, no eyewitness, and the only person, one eyewitness, is to seeing him in the house, and that person, there's all sorts of questions you can raise about that person. There's a lot of ways to poke holes in that case. So, and you're getting what could be, in theory, if you have a bad judge, an anti-death penalty, capital punishment judge, you're getting what could be the best of what you could be hoping for in a verdict. Clear. Yes. 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 I see some people in there saying he was Israeli FF, this Wes Rowley. All right, so maybe one of you can explain to me the slugs thing. I've seen a couple people say slugs. So slugs are able to, you can put slugs in a shotgun and get greater distance. I'm not even a defense attorney. I'm just telling you what a defense attorney would say. I've heard enough defense attorneys weigh in on this case. Two chiefs dead, one firefighter in stable condition, not 411. All right. I was going on reports that I heard yesterday, which had been confirmed from a couple of people. Will you tell me I'm wrong on the numbers there? Now I have to look this up so I can make sure. I want to be 100% accurate. Now I can't guess anymore. So let's get it up. I wasn't even planning on doing this story, but now let's get it accurate. So, for accuracy, we have to go to Times of India. I don't trust them at all. I think they're a leftist rag. But 20-year-old Wes Rowley, who lured firefighters after starting a brush fire intentionally in Idaho and then killed two firefighters when they responded to the fire, had disturbing childhood, CNN reported, citing court documents. As soon as the shooter was identified as Wes Rowley, social media was abuzz, reported photo of his parents. Mother and stepfather sporting MAGA hats. While the veracity of most of the social media claims are not known, Wes Rowley's grandfather spoke to CNN and said he was not a loner and had no reason to be involved in something like this. Wes Rowley, who was found dead at the scene himself, wanted to be a firefighter, his grandfather said. He wanted to be a fireman. He was doing tree work, and he wanted to be a fireman in the forest, Dale Rowley said. As far as I know, he was actually pursuing it. Dale Rowley said he typically spoke with his grandson on a weekly basis. They hadn't spoken last month because Wes Rowley had lost his phone. He said the suspect had a loving family and friends in vacation in Hawaii and his mother last year, according to social media posts. He said he was holding out hope that his grandson was not the actual shooter. Okay. CNN cited court documents claiming that Rowley's mother filed for divorce in 2015 when Rowley was 10 years old. In court documents, which I guess if he's hoping he's not the actual shooter, I guess in theory, there could have been another shooter who killed Wes Rowley and left a gun there. It's possible. Which that's a horrifying thought, right? CNN cited court documents claiming that Rowley's mother filed for divorce in 2015 when Rowley was 10 years old. In court documents, she wrote that Rowley's father threatened her, pushed her to the ground, and punched several holes in the walls. He threatened to sit outside my house with a sniper rifle or burn my house down, she said. Divorce was granted in 2 months and Rowley's mother became the primary residential parent. His father was initially prevented from having contact with his wife or son, but the order was later amended. Rowley's father told CNN that he was not close with his son and hadn't seen him since his family gathering last year. There you go. So I guess they're saying two. There was one in stable condition. I'm just looking. I'm seeing here to confirm what you're saying about the critical condition. So the 2 veteran firefighters are killed and a third is critical condition. So this is verifying what Tay said. Tay Mario said. Battalion Chief Frank Harwood, 42, had been with the county fire department for 17 years, was killed. Kootenai County Fire and Rescue Chief Christopher Ray said during a news conference Monday. Harwood was married to 2 children. Also, Coeur d'Alene Fire Department Battalion Chief John Morrison, 52, was killed after working with the department for 28 years. And then you have fire engineer David Tisdale, 47, sustained gunshot wounds and was in critical condition, although authorities say he had 2 successful surgeries. And they claim that Rowley killed himself. So they're still trying to sort out what exactly happened here and what his motivation was. But that's what we got. He pleads guilty. So getting back to Kohberger, he pleads guilty to avoid death sentence, and the prosecution avoids lengthy trial. I remain skeptical of touch DNA due to its unreliability and susceptibility to contamination. Had to be a second gun. Oh, you're saying about the firefighter? Yeah, I think there has to be a second gun also. This is what happens when we're covering 2 stories at once. Good job getting both in there. Yeah. Sorry. All right, shotgun ammo mini breakdown. Birdshot is lots of small pellets out of a smoothbore. Slug, usually from a rifled barrel, is one solid mass that will be spun from the rifling and travel further, but not rifle distances. So instead of lots of small pellets, the birdshot shotgun, a slug from a rifle barrel is one solid mass that will be spun from the rifling and travel further, but not rifle distances. That was very helpful. Thank you. I thought it was just birdshot and buckshot. I didn't know buckshot is referred to as slug. So that's what I'm learning here. Biodad is gang biker, all tattoos. Hadn't seen son in a while. Perp spoke with firemen about moving his truck before shooting started. Play the last presser. Spoke with. Play the whole presser. Let me check this way. That's the best way to find that would be on X. Let's check X. Idaho fire. That's not helpful.
Okay, my name is Robert Norris.
I could spend a long time trying to find this, but with this.
I am the sheriff of Kootenai County. This information is very preliminary and is subject to change. We want to give you and the public as much information as quickly as possible. So at approximately 1:21 p.m. this afternoon, we received reports of a fire on the east side of Canfield Mountain. Fire assets responded to the scene, and at approximately 2 p.m. this afternoon, it was reported that firefighters were receiving shots.
This is not the last presser. This is
fired at them. We now have 2 deaths. We have an unknown amount of casualties.
This is
we
what I was
still
going.
have civilians that are coming off of that mountain. We might have civilians that are stuck or in shock on that mountain. So this is a very, very fresh situation. We are actively taking sniper fire as we speak.
This was horrifying when he said this yesterday.
This is an active situation. We have multiple agencies that are on scene from local and federal authorities, and we are prepared to neutralize this suspect who is currently actively shooting at public safety personnel. We are prepared to neutralize this suspect as quickly as possible. And that's really all that we know as of right now. We don't know who the suspects are. We don't know how many there are. So I know that it's very, very, very early, and I don't.
He actually said during this conference, if you could take the shot, take it. That's how desperate they were. Maybe this is the one.
My name is Sheriff Robert Norris, Norris, and what we'd like to accomplish today here at this press conference is, when you leave here today, I want you to know who the suspect is, know what we know about the suspect right now, I'll give you a fire update of where the fire is right now, and some of the challenges that we had in making a containment on a 3.2 square mile mountain, and to let you know that we had a jumper off a Veterans Bridge, and we'll give you just a little bit of information on that. So the suspect that has been identified by our Cooney County Coroner's Office, Coroner Duke Johnson there, has been identified as Wes Val Rowley, date of birth of May 1st, 2005.
20 years old.
As of right now.
Barely 20.
And this is all very, very preliminary. We've had a lot of resources at the...
I'm gonna pause here and tell you that I'm feeling like gifting memberships right now. So I'm gonna get this out of my system. Let me do that. Let me do that. There you go. Bringing on 5 people in here. And look at that. I hit Aquatic Nomad, John Mosley, Thad the Man, Amiana List, and Sharon Lathan. Welcome to the following. This is not at all a cult type of cult. And I'm not, even though I give people from time to time. But it's not at all. It's not at all that I'm this, because it's not because, anyone should think I'm the leader. I am definitely not the leader of the following. I'm just a host. And look at that. You see, gifting begets gifting. Look at that. Gifting 10 good Lawgic memberships. Good job, you, Brian. That's how we close out the month. I got 14 minutes left in the month. 14 minutes left in the month. So yeah, gifting memberships is basically what to close out June. That's a great way to do it. Who'd you hit us with? The following 10 people gifted memberships courtesy of Brian Oldenkamp. That would include Mama Bear Leia, at 1 CBB41, Sadie, Otto Bond, Natalie Goldie, CC Reagan, Kiska Hamlin, Terry, Kit, and Kathleen Menges, and Mama Pillow. Welcome to the following. The following, which is a gathering of like-minded individuals who are seeking greater personal growth through community unity, learning, and thinking. That's all it is. There's nothing to be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just, that's all it is. That's all it is. So, yeah. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna match. Should I match you? I'm gonna match you, Brian. Here we go. I'm gonna send another 5. Let's bring him on in. There you go. Gave out 10, just like that. Venus F. Welcome to the following Proxy Loxy 82 variant. Pam running. Look at that. I got you, Pam. I got you. And John Carroll. Welcome to the following. Please bear in mind that it's in no way, shape, or form a cult. There's no tracksuits that are mandatory, no self-harm, no harming others, no spaceships, no Kool-Aid, no throwing virgins into volcanoes. It's just a group of like-minded people. Mild farm work. No, there's no dancing around bonfires. It's not at all a cult type of cult. So welcome aboard. And there you go. Thank you again, Brian. Uzelian says it was a strange day that he did it, as it was almost exactly 24 years since a wildfire burnt down the Aryan Brotherhood compound there. Also, they asked him to move his car, according to Oregon Live. All right, so let me try it. I want to try and find. Let's see if I can find that.
This is a Fox News alert. I'm Marianne Rafferty, live in Los Angeles. We are just getting word that the suspected shooter, accused of starting a fire and then ambushing first responders, killing 2 firefighters and wounding at least one that we heard was in surgery earlier, that a person was found with a gunshot wound. They believe that is the shooter.
That's not helpful. I put in car. I saw a couple of other people had mentioned something about that whole car thing. I'm very curious about this. Was it in that thing I was watching earlier? I really don't want to go through the whole 7 minutes if and then not have it have a payoff. Go through 7 minutes and then not have it have a payoff? I'm sitting here crying. Fine, I'll try vehicle.
Officers that were on scene that were trying to make heads and tails out of what was occurring. And during this time, we exchanged gunfire with the suspect, and we also got information. We received information from the White House, from Kash Patel, the FBI, from Governor Brad Little, and also Raul Labrador, that anything that we needed, that they would absolutely respond. So we had a lot of assets that came into that command post. And then we had a briefing about 6:30, about 18:30 hours at the command post. And in that briefing, we kind of gave an update to the enforcement officers that were on scene, that were trying to, from the White House, from Kash Patel, the FBI, from Governor Brad Little, and also Raul Labrador, that anything that we needed, that they would absolutely respond. So we had a lot of assets that came into that command post. And then we had a briefing about 6:30, about 18:30 hours at the command post. And in that briefing, we kind of gave an update to the agencies that this is still an active shooter, and that as soon as this individual could be neutralized, that he should be neutralized and the threat should be eliminated as quickly as possible. At a
Zelling is telling me, he said, Joe, there are three main types of shells for shotguns: birdshot, small BBs; buckshot, much larger BBs; and slugs, solid metal. First two don't go far, the last one go farther. That explains it. Okay. Oh, and Uzelian also gave me a link.
Approximately 1940 hours, we did have information that let me back up just a second. We had a cell phone activation that was in the same spot since about 3:16, and that it was in the same area, and we honed in on that cell phone, and we saw that there was a male appeared to be deceased with a weapon nearby. So we have currently one dead shooter. Based on the preliminary investigation that was being conducted, keep in mind we had a fire that was rapidly it was approaching the body, so we had to scoop up that body, and we had to transport that body to a different location. But based on the preliminary information, we believe that is the only shooter that was on that mountain at that time. So there is no threat to the community at this time. Based on the trajectory and based on the type of weapons that this individual had that we could recover, we believe only the one shooter. We did.
All right. I'm not finding it impressive him saying it, but this was shared courtesy with Zellian. Thank you, Zellian, saying gunman shot Idaho firefighters after they asked him to move his vehicle. A man shot firefighters battling a blaze in northern Idaho after they asked him to move his vehicle, killing two of them and wounding a third. You would think that they would know what type of gun he had. I mean, if they saw it, this is even more perplexing. Unless the third one was critical and couldn't talk to them. That would explain it. So the third one's critical and couldn't talk. That would explain it. All right. All right. So I guess that would explain that there was no one there to inform the police. Horrible story. Horrible story. I don't cover these things. They're very horrible. I don't like talking about stuff like this. All right. So let's talk about let me just make sure I covered everything here. Wesley says he owned a shotgun and a 22 long gun. They couldn't get to the first two guys that were hit. Not seeing the person wounded, assumed the worst. Fair enough. And that's also probably why the initial reports were potential for multiple shooters, as you heard. That's part of, like, I think, the fog of war, or the fog of the moment. There's not just the literal fog from smoke, but there's just a smoke screen about a chaotic situation that they want to take caution that in case there's more than one shooter, that people shouldn't just make assumptions that if you hear shots coming from one direction, that, that's the only place that your focus can be, and not to be aware of your surroundings aside from that. Especially with all the echoing in there, you could see why that would cause, this is, a hilly area. You can understand why that would cause that concern. Instagram pic from Sheriff shows oppressor in perp wearing ammo belt full of slugs. Fireman pushed the car over hill so he couldn't escape. Should I try to get that before I get into this? Before I get into the big beautiful bill? Should I? Let's roll it. Yeah, I'm not seeing it here. And I'm going to just pass on this. I wasn't even planning. I was planning on doing this story for like 3 minutes, and this is taking me. I spent a lot longer on this story than I meant to. This is me looking through different Instagram posts. This is what ends up happening. Look at these idiots. See, this is these MAGA parents who choose their child to military-style weapons at a very young age. He grew up to be West Rowley, a terrorist that murdered 2 firefighters. Get bent. Get bent. Who taught Darrell Brooks how to drive? Who taught him how to drive? His parents introduced him to cars. Idiots. See, this is what you get. This is what you get. I'm trying finding the images. This is what I get when I put up West Rowley. Is it 2 S's? I think it's 2 S's. That could be the problem. That could be the problem, Joe. I don't know. I can't. I've done enough on this story. I'm moving on. So the big beautiful bill is currently in tatters. Why? Because we can't stop giving illegal aliens Medicaid. Apparently that's the big deal here for Susan Collins. Republican Senator Susan Collins just voted against defunding Planned Parenthood and voted to keep illegal aliens on Medicaid. That's Susan Collins. A lot of people mad at that, but she's not the only one who's against this big beautiful bill. You also have Elon Musk. Now, Trump has speculated as to the reason that Elon Musk is against it is because of the 13% drop in Tesla sales over the last quarter. But he's basically been screaming, it's obvious with the insane spending of this bill, which increases the debt ceiling by a record $5 trillion, that we live in a one-party country, the Porky Pig Party. Time for a new political party that actually cares about the people. How can you call yourself Freedom Caucus if you vote for a debt slavery bill with the biggest debt ceiling increase in history? You also post out here, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their head in shame. And they will lose their primary next year if it's the last thing I do on this earth. All right. Elon is not playing around. Alex Jones is obviously not a big fan. A lot of people not fans of the big, beautiful bill. I'll tell you right now, if you cut out the illegal alien portion, I'm not a fan of this bill either. Now, and that was what I'm so mystified by, because what we've seen is it ended up getting in the end 56 votes, lost 56 to 44. It had to get 60. So I want to explain this to you as to why it is I'm confused. The way it works in the Senate is standard operating procedure since 1975 is you need to get 60 votes for a bill to pass. But if it's an appropriations bill, there's a rule that kicks in which says that if you get 50%, only 50 senators, that would be sufficient. Appropriations meaning spending. It's a spending bill. In that case, you only need 50%. Now, they sent it up there expecting that this was going to be an appropriations bill that only required 50%, in which case the 56 votes they got would be sufficient. But apparently, there's an individual who's called a parliamentarian. Parliamentarian has the role of actually deciding. Get this, an unelected official who, in an advisory capacity, decides whether the 50% rule, whether that is something that is, whether we're dealing with that you need 50 votes or 60 votes. Now, obviously, the difference between needing 50 or 60 votes on any particular bill is a big deal, because with the level of contentiousness we have in the Senate right now, 50 for the Republicans seems very attainable. 60 feels damn near impossible. So you can understand why this is a very important thing. And I asked Grok about this individual here. And it's a woman named Elizabeth McDonough. So let's look at Elizabeth McDonough. Make this a little bigger. Elizabeth McDonough, born February 16th, 1966, has served as a Senate parliamentarian since 2012. So it's been there 13 years. The parliamentarian is a nonpartisan, unelected official who advises the presiding officer of the Senate on the interpretation and application of Senate rules, procedures, and precedents. This role is obviously critical during legislative debates, especially on complex matters like budget reconciliation amendments, such as the Cornyn Amendment mentioned in the ex post. McDonough began her career in 1990 as a legislative reference assistant in the Senate Library and later worked as an assistant morning business editor for the Congressional Record. She attended Vermont Law School, earning a JD in 1998 and interned with Judge Royce C. Lambert. After graduating, she worked as a trial attorney for the U.S. Department of Justice, handling immigration cases in New Jersey before joining the Senate Parliamentarian's Office in 1999. Which is, by the way, she was not a trial attorney. No one's a trial attorney for the U.S. DOJ and actually handling cases in a trial capacity and in their first year. There's no such thing. No such thing. I call BS on this. This is not true. She did not try cases. I can guarantee you she tried 0 cases. No one tries cases for the DOJ in their first year out of law school. That would be stupid. So that's kind of ridiculous. She didn't earn a JD in 98. Most people don't even get admitted until the following year. So if you earn a JD in 98, she spent 10 minutes working for the DOJ. She was not trying any cases. It's such BS. It's utter crap. You DM the photo to me? Go back later if I want to. Thank you. We'll see. Yeah, this is. I'll take things that never happened for 1,000, please, Alex. Handling immigration cases in New Jersey. For joining the Senate Parliamentarian's Office in 1999 as an assistant parliamentarian. She was promoted to senior assistant parliamentarian in 2002 and became the first woman to hold top parliamentary position in 2012. McDonald's made several notable rulings that have influenced legislative outcomes. For instance, in 2017, she enforced Senate Rule 19, leading to Senator Elizabeth Warren being silenced during a debate over Jeff Sessions' nomination by reading statements from Ted Kennedy and Coretta Scott King. More recently, on June 30th, 2025, as referenced in the Post, she reportedly changed the vote threshold for waiving the Cornyn Amendment from 51 to 60 votes, a decision that led to the motion's failure. 56 yay, 44 nay, and triggered significant backlash from some senators and ex-users who argued blocked efforts to remove illegal aliens from Medicaid. The parliamentarian's role is advisory, and the presiding officer or Senate Majority Leader can overrule her decisions or even fire her. As happened with her predecessor, Robert Dove, in 2001. During a dispute with Majority Leader Trent Lott, her 2021 ruling against including a pathway legalization for immigrants in $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill also drew attention. Highlighting her influence over budget-related legislation under the Byrd Rule. Now, this is interesting. Her 2021 ruling, in case you think that she's hyper-partisan, so she stopped the legalization of immigrants in a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. So they're spending $3.5 trillion, and they also want to throw in there a pathway for legalization for illegal aliens. She's like, no. This needs to have 60, not just 50. You might think that when you have $3.5 trillion in spending, that this now knocks it into something that is an appropriations bill. And she stopped, presumably, the Democrats from giving a pathway to legalization for illegal immigrants. So everyone who's jumping to a conclusion that this woman, Elizabeth McDonough, is some leftist hack because of what she did today, I think is kind of losing sight of that's possibly not the case. It could be that she's just someone who's going by what the rules are. And depending on the rules, that as far as what triggered this advice, it might not be an anti-Trump thing. It could be a neocon type of, this is what the rules say, and we have to uphold our institution, in which case I would have more respect for this decision. So it's highlighting her influence over budget-related legislation under the Byrd Rule. The current controversy is seen the exo stems from perceptions that her unelected status gives her undue power, with calls for dismissal by figures like Senator John Thune or even President Trump. She gets $216,000 a year, reflecting her senior position. She's the only woman to have the this role. All right. So I'm going to tell you this. A lot of people are outraged. For me, if you're taking out the illegal immigrants, I don't know what we need this bill for. Here's Tom Tillis, who announced his retirement, by the way, over the weekend. He said he's not running for re-election. So he's announcing his retirement, and here's him going nuts about certain provisions of the bill, specifically referring to Amendment 2, the provider tax. I'm going to explain to you what the provider tax is, so that when you're watching this clip, you have a better understanding and comprehension as to what it is that you're watching, what he's freaking out about. Okay? So this gentleman here, Senator from North Carolina, Tom Tillis, who you can see barking in this, I don't know what this is. This is something this should be illegal if you're not from Texas. I don't know what's happening here.
Oval Office.
I don't know what this is. This should be illegal. I thought it's only supposed to be with a button-down shirt in general. I never saw that with like a pullover shirt. I don't know what's happening. Maybe one of you can explain this. This is supposed to be a Texas thing, and it's supposed to be a button-down shirt. It's like in place of a tie. I don't know what he's wearing here. I don't even know what you call this thing. I don't know. But let me explain to you what the provider tax is. So you can understand what you're going to hear him barking about for 90 seconds or 60 seconds, 55. So the provider tax is a tax that is that is paid by hospitals, various medical facilities, that they pay a tax, and then there's a matching fund they pay a tax, and then whatever they pay, there's a matching fund that comes from the federal government, and all that's supposed to go to help cover Medicaid costs. So they want those tax dollars from the federal government. Also, when these providers pay that tax, understand that's you paying the tax. That's you paying the tax. They call it the provider tax. Trust me, that's tacked onto your bill. So he's mad that we're not having more taxes, because this is carving out the provider tax. This big, beautiful bill, which is designed in many ways to try and and provide tax relief. It's supposed to be upping tax credits for children to $2,500, and it's basically the reason people say it's going to be so expensive is because it's offering a lot of tax relief. Now, I am not a big fan of bills that offer tax relief at the expense of the taxpayer, because that is very poor fiscal responsibility. What I like about this bill is supposedly it's supposed to help provide funding in order to enable us to deport a whole bunch of illegals. And that becomes very relevant in the context of the next story I'm going to cover about SCOTUS's decision over the weekend, which relates to universal injunctions and our ability to actually remove and deport illegals without having some leftist judge stand in the way. So now that SCOTUS has done that preview, they have kind of sort of done that, not exactly entirely, but for the most part, they've carved away much of the problems we have with universal injunctions. Much of it, not all of it. I'll explain when I get to the next story. But the point I'm getting at here is now Trump wants to basically start removing people, not just the criminals, like the dangerous convicted felons, but the ones who are guilty of the jaywalking crime of illegally entering our country, and get rid of those folks as well. So you can imagine that that's going to cost a lot of money. You need to have more housing facilities. They even opened up a place called Alligator Alcatraz. I'm not making that up, which has a moat with alligators. And this is in the Everglades. I don't know. Supposedly it can house 5,000 people. A moat with alligators. Okay. One road and a moat going around it with alligators. Alligator Alcatraz is what they're calling it. That's supposed to house up to 5,000 illegals while they're being detained for the purposes of being deported. But there's obviously a lot of increased expenses that are associated in the short term with removing these illegal aliens. So that's part of the cost of this bill. I think that's $46 billion out of the cost of this bill. But there's also added costs with respect to the tax relief that's being offered here. And part of that tax relief is slicing away this provider tax and saying you're not going to have to pay that. Well, you got here Tom Tillis over here. He's not too happy about that, and he's gonna let you know about that.
On health care and betraying a promise, it is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room when I was there with finance, where he said we can go after waste, fraud, and abuse on any programs. Now, those amateurs that are advising him, not Dr. Oz, I'm talking about White House healthcare experts, refuse to tell him that those instructions that were to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse all of a sudden eliminates a government program that's called the provider tax. We have morphed a legal construct that admittedly has been abused and should be eliminated into waste, fraud, and abuse.
He's complaining. Let's hear that again, and let's hear that a little slower. What?
We have morphed a legal construct that admittedly has been abused and should be eliminated
A little slower.
It admittedly has been abused and should be eliminated.
And I don't want you to eliminate it. I'm mad that this is eliminating it. Explain it to me, Tommy. Explain it to me. Or should I say Tommy? Explain it to me. Explain it to me, because I don't get it. I don't understand what your problem is here. Walk me through it. Walk me through it. Maybe if you say it a little slower, maybe it'll make a little more sense.
Try. That admittedly has been abused
And
should be eliminated.
boom. Boom. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't know. There's nothing else. You don't need to say anything else. Okay? And your fancy duds there. Your fancy duds. One of you knows what that thing is called. At least one of you knows what that thing is called. I'm looking. What the hell is he talking about? What's he talking about? That's funny. Yeah. So that's Tom Tillis. That's Tom Tillis there. Adios. Good riddance. He knew he was going to get primaried for this. So he quit over the weekend. Literally announced it over the weekend. I'm out of here, and I'm about to go burning down as hard as I can the big, beautiful bill on my way out. Wow. Wow. Now, I will tell you this. I was talking about Elizabeth McDonough, the parliamentarian who said this is going to be 60 votes, not 51 votes. I'm just going to point out something. So people are mad at Thune that he didn't overrule her. J.D. Vance could have overruled her also. I don't know that it's a good thing to overrule her. And I know that some of you will be like, no, we always play by the rules. They never do. But that's not true in this context. Part of the good thing about the Senate is that it is a place for bills to bake. I don't want to start burning down the House. J.D. Vance has no authority to fire her. That is the exclusive domain of the Senate Majority Leader, which is Thune. Thune could have fired her if he wanted, although it would look really, if he did it today, that would look really, or this weekend, that would look really. Everyone wants to go hog wild about like how they're angry that this big beautiful bill is, waste. My natural inclination is against big bills. My natural inclination is to be like, no. Now I can give some added leeway to Trump because I think that he's trying to implement programs that are likely to benefit America. But these tax cuts, to me, tax cuts are a short-term Band-Aid, which our children and grandchildren will end up paying for. And so I'm not a big fan of the whole tax cut thing. And I do think that with respect to his financial policies, the big knock on Trump in his first administration, the two things that he was knocked on, were his appointments and his spending. So, and I think that I wanted you to bear in mind, if you're like me, when you initially supported Trump, I came to appreciate all the greatness of Donald Trump. Certainly his foreign policy, exceptional. If you're like me, when you first voted for Trump in 2016, you likely had no idea what you were going to. There's no way you could have known what we were going to get. But I was holding my nose voting against Hillary and saying to myself, this is someone who wants to succeed, if only for his own personal glorification. And because of that, we have a chance that America will be the beneficiary of his, let's call it his vanity. That because of his vanity, he wants to be known as a phenomenal president, which means he's going to bust his tail to do a great job. And I think that bore out. I think we saw that, certainly until 2020, that I think we saw that bear out. We saw that the fruits of that. But the spending, the short term, the problem is that if you're about having that as your primary focus, you're certainly more apt to be burning through money and kicking the can of the headache for burning that money to your successor or two successors down the road. So you're kicking that can down the road so that this period here would look great and ignoring potential hazards that can be caused by your fiscal policy. So because of that, it makes sense that the second problem we had with him was his spending. And he spent a lot, even before COVID. He was burning through money before COVID. Once COVID happened, then I think he felt a certain push that he had to spend money. Otherwise, he was going to lose his election in 2020. So I think that that's what we saw play out with his first term. But the point that I'm getting at here is the one area where I'm a little bit, the two areas I'm most likely to have concerns about him are with respect to his appointments, which frankly, his second term appointments were much better than his first ones, at least in name, if not in, at least in name, if not in practice so far. But the other was his spending. I had concerns about his spending. So I'm sort of, I like the idea of spending. I think it pays off. I think that it's an investment in saving ourselves money because I think having illegal aliens here costs us, they say, $150 billion a year. So I think if we spend money to get rid of illegal aliens and deport them, that's an investment now that's designed to benefit our children's long-term expenses that they're not going to have to be paying that $150 billion a year. So even if we end up having to spend $1 trillion to get rid of them, that pays for itself over 10 years. And I don't think it's going to cost $1 trillion. So the point that I'm getting at here is that part of the bill makes sense to me. They said it was going to cost $46 billion. That's money. That's money right there. Because it's costing us $150 billion a year. You tell me it's going to cost $50 billion to get rid of them. To me, that's a no-brainer. I mean, do that every single day. But the other elements to it, which the increased spending comes because of the tax cuts, that's trying to appease your make people smile at you when they see you, that they're happy next month, and ignoring the misery that they will likely be complaining about 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. So I'm really okay with this bill being drastically cut. The only reason that I was okay with the spending, I'm okay with this bill dying and then a new plan put in place in order to fund getting rid of the illegals. The only reason I was okay with the spending was because I was like, okay, if we could turn this into something passable by turning it into an appropriations bill and then change it from 60 votes into 50 votes, then I understand this. But if you tell me we're still at 60 votes, even with all this added spending, I'm like, I don't want all the spending. I don't want it. I don't want it. What I'm frustrated about is I am curious about the logic that Elizabeth McDonough approached when she decided this is 60 votes, not 50, or 51. And we never get to see that. That's something that's only shared with the Senate Majority Leader, the logic behind it. Whether there's a certain passage in there which all of a sudden makes it go from 50 to 60, is the old concept something that has to be 60? We don't have any answers on that, and no one's giving us any direction. And that's another failing of Thune, which frankly, the dude he's a failure. He's a loser. He's not someone we should be excited about at all. So that's my thoughts about the big, beautiful bill. For now, it's dead. For now, they're trying to figure out what to do with it. If there's a way to resurrect it, if there's a way to fix it, if there's a way to get it passed. If it ends up as the Senate has bastardized this bill, I've become less and less enamored with it. So if it passes, I'm not going to be crying very hard about it, but I'm very, as my people would say, I'm very parv about this. I'm very neutral about this bill. I'm like, it could be good. It could also be disastrous. The bolo tie, yes, he's culturally appropriate. It's called a bolo, worn with a button down, not a polo. Tacky, he's pretending badly to be a cowboy. DMU Senator 10 Bud explainer of this. Oh, let's see what she's been DMing me this whole time. Yes, let me see what we got. This is my DMs don't work well. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. I don't even see you here. What is this? Try to make big and small. It's a mess. This is why X can be very annoying. Try to find this way. I'm trying to find you here. There it is. This is the picture that she sent me of Wes Rowley. There you can see on his waist here are the slugs. Thank you for that. And he also shared with me this. Democrats are relentlessly spreading misinformation about our efforts to preserve and protect Medicaid. The facts aren't on their side. Nobody's cutting Medicaid. We're making it sustainable for those who originally intended for. I'll explain here. What comments advise again? I'll come back to this in a moment. Medicaid is a critical program. Funding Medicaid spending has increased by more than 200% since 2008 and 51% since just 2019. Why? It costs the federal government way more to cover able-bodied adults added under Medicaid's expansion than those traditionally enrolled. Through a budgeting gimmick, states have required medical providers to pay the state's fair share of Medicaid costs. Why would they agree to do this? Because providers get this money back, often in spades. States leverage this to receive as much as 9-to-1 federal dollars. For patients who Medicaid was intended to serve, single mothers, disabled folks, children, the federal government is required to cover a significantly lower portion of the costs compared to patients added to the program under Medicaid expansion. In North Carolina, the federal government's share of the cost of traditional Medicaid's recipient care is 64%. But for able-bodied adult recently added on the Medicaid expansion, the federal government pays 90%. Meanwhile, more federal spending means higher taxes and more debt. States inflate their payments to providers and divert some of the federal funds to backfill their own state budgets for their political pet projects. That money is supposed to be for the health, but it can be a slush fund. That means higher premiums and costs for you. If we continue the current trend, federal Medicaid subsidies could reach $5.4 trillion over the next 10 years. These costs will leave the federal government unable to care for the most vulnerable. Wow. That is a great explainer. Wow. What are we doing about this in the One Big Beautiful Bill? We're implementing responsible reforms to Medicaid to make sure that when Americans fall in hard times, they can access Medicaid funds as intended. We're curbing the provider tax gimmick.
It's not like I haven't seen this before.
I got it. We're curbing the provider tax gimmick so states can't take advantage of federal taxpayers. We're giving able-bodied adults on Medicaid a choice to work or volunteer if they wish to continue receiving Medicaid benefits. We're removing illegal immigrants from Medicaid. Yeah, this all sounds positive. This is very, very well explained by Senator Budd. Nobody's going to take away Medicaid benefits from patients for whom Medicaid was designed to serve. Senate Republicans are trying to slow the rates of exponential cost increases for a program we all agree must survive for future generations. All right, he's asking to debunk it. Let's hear. Claims about Medicaid cuts are contentious. Republicans like Senator Budd argue the 2025 proposal strengthened Medicaid by preventing fraud and focusing on vulnerable groups through measures like work requirements. Okay. That's not really very well. That's a fail. Critics backed by a CBO estimates say these $800 billion over 10 years, potentially leaving 8.6 million uninsured. Work requirements historically reduced coverage without boosting jobs. Public opinion, with only 17% favoring cuts, leans against these changes. Both sides have valid points, but the impact, you didn't debunk anything. That's not debunking anything. I think it's debunked. Nice try. I appreciate the effort. All right, what are you saying here? North Carolina is advised against expanding Medicaid because state was on hook if federal cutback as what's happening now. Tillis couldn't win without Trump, so he quit. Well said, Kathy. The Senate needs to pass the Doge bill passed in the House. Good luck with that. Donald Trump get votes with an EO to drop Congress slush. Would you love that? I don't think he needs votes anymore. I assume you're referring to the slush fund that they have for people who get accused of engaging in extracurricular activities. And yes, I meant what that implies. What do you think I meant? Well, my extracurricular activities reference there. Let me check out here. Really? I'm looking at the diggers, and someone there guessed I was 62. Eat me. 62. 62, Soltron. I see it. 62. Wow. That is so wrong on so many levels. 62. 62. Wow. I really hate all of you. Happy birthday, Kathy. None of you know my age. Really. I haven't mentioned it. I celebrated 19 birthdays and none of you. I never mentioned my age. Come on. Seems like GOP senators always been spoilers of good bills. Of course they are. All neocons. Yeah, that's correct. I am now 55. Born in 1970. So there you go. All right. Let me get into I want to get into SCOTUS. Let me get into the SCOTUS decision. Drop dead. Oh, Kool-Aid, squirrels, and depends. Yeah. Okay. There we go. I have something fun for you guys. See, we have fun. This is unbelievable. This is fun. I almost use this as my intro. It's a song with quotes from Amy Coney Barrett. This is a song. Let's turn it down a little. It's a little loud. It still may be a little loud. This is a song with quotes from Amy Coney Barrett's utter destruction of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's totted, insane dissent in Trump versus CASA. Insane dissent. Literally something that should be, her dissent was so bad it should be an impeachable offense. That's how bad her dissent was. She literally is like, we shouldn't be doing our jobs. We shouldn't, like, it was insane. It's crazy that this is like the future of the Supreme Court. Horrifying. Unbelievable. So Amy Coney Barrett did not mince words. This is one of the most aggressive takedowns of a dissent I've ever read. So I'm not a huge fan of Amy Coney Barrett. I'm not even a big fan of this particular decision, as I will get into shortly. But I am a fan of her writing in this particular, her writing style here. So enjoy this song. You're gonna love this one.
We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent. Not to mention the Constitution itself. Justice Jackson skips over that part, because analyzing the governing statute involves boring legalese. Justice Jackson would do well to heed her own admonition. Everyone from the president on down is bound by law that goes for judges too. We will.
That is great. That is great. That is great. So good. Yes, that's my ringtone now. Maybe. It was so bad. Anyway. Whew. We should look at some of her quotes and break down that decision for you. First, let's break down the decision. Let's do that first. So Rod D. Martin is a big fan of this decision. I'm just going to say this. There's an opening that was left for universal injunctions. I'm going to get the bad part out of the way. This was about universal injunctions. That's a reference to when judges basically decide, I'm going to sign a TRO, which now will contravene what Trump put in his executive order. And now the executive order has to be stayed and put on hold. We're just going to take your executive order and shelve it until I decide this case as to whether or not it's constitutional. I agree that the EO you passed is constitutional. So we've seen how there have been many dozens of these universal injunctions. Why do they call it a universal injunction? You might be saying, Joe, why is it called a universal injunction? Because you have a plaintiff who comes to the court and the judge says, I'm applying this to everyone who's pretty much like you. So defund USAID. I got 5 companies who are here who were supposed to be beneficiaries of money from USAID. I'm going to say all freezing on USAID is now that Trump put out there. All of that is gone. You have passed a statute that affects people in my jurisdiction here in Rhode Island. I'm going to say that no, it doesn't apply to people here in Rhode Island. It doesn't apply to people in, not just the person who came in, but anyone in Rhode Island. It applies to people who are in Iowa. It applies to people who are in Kentucky and California. That my stay is stopping his order across the whole country. Insanity. So that's why they call it universal, because I'm not just entering an injunction for this particular plaintiff in this particular scenario. No, I'm applying this to everyone and basically undoing this EO until I decide whether or not it's constitutional years from now. Jackson snapped her fingers as she crossed herself, popped her neck back and forth, and said, I ain't your holler back girl. Wait for it. Full stop. Full stop. Yeah, she did write the words full stop. Horrifying. Horrifying. Justice Marshall was rolling in his grave when he read her dissent. So, why do I say there's a problem with this? Because the way the majority wrote it, and this is a flaw that is highlighted by Justices Thomas and Alito, is that there are loopholes where there are scenarios where they will allow for universal injunctions. The majority, based on this opinion, if a state comes in, that they're more likely to grant a universal injunction and say that's okay. And if they certify a class, which we actually saw Judge Boasberg, or whatever that jackass in D.C., his name is, I think it's Boasberg, but I don't remember, that he certified class that everyone is Spanish, is Trende Rago, you're part of a class. I tried explaining this on Spaces on Friday, and I'll try to walk you through it here and now, okay? What is the class? What's the class thing? What does that mean? You may have heard of something called a class action suit. A class action suit is you have a lead plaintiff, and that person is the name as the plaintiff and they're suing a company. So, most class action suits involve SEC fraud. Okay? Where basically what they'll find is that there's disclosures that companies have to make. Financial records have to make disclosures in order so that people who are potential investors will be aware of factors which may discourage you from investing and buying their stock. And there's an error in the disclosure, which then keeps bad information hidden from a potential investor. So all these people, it might be bad information for the company that should have been in there is left out or is misstated or something to that effect. So you'll have a bunch of law firms that will start a class action suit. And they'll be like, hey, everyone who bought this stock or owned this stock during this period of time after the disclosure was made and until the disclosure was corrected, which might have been a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, 4 years, whatever. Anyone who is basically owner of a stock and that, you are invited to become part of this class because we start a class action suit. And damages, so if you want to get your taste of damages, you can get your taste of damages by being part of the class. That's the most common type of class action suits. There are certain firms out there which specialize in class action suits. You actually need to be a specialist in class action suits as part of the requirements. One of the 4 requirements in order to become certified as being part of a class. The certification here is a very important element. I'm going to explain that to you and try and make this something that everyone who's watching this can understand. Okay? But here's an example. You might not be someone who invests in the stock market. So here's an example of another type of class action suit thing. Let's assume that AT&T has an advertisement out there which says that you're going to be paying $24 a month for some service. And due to some sort of glitch, for a period of 8 months, they end up charging everyone $34. They overcharge everyone by $10 a month. Some people notice it and scream about it right away. Others don't, whatever. And so now they overcharge everyone by $10 a month. You start a class action suit. What do you do with the class action suit? Well, class action suit basically means you have a lead plaintiff, one person who was a victim. They were supposed to be charging me $24. They charged me $34. They overcharged me by $10. That's your lead plaintiff. They're the head of the class. Why do we allow for class? And now other people, whoever wants, can join into that class. Say, hey, I'm in the same circumstance. I'm in the same boat. Why does our judicial system allow for class action suits? Well, the answer is fairly obvious. It's because it's to help the little guy. It's to help people who are like, I can't sue AT&T for $10. That's ridiculous. I'm going to go to court and waste all my time suing for $10. Now, to AT&T, who are stealing $10 month by month, even if you have $80, you had 8 months worth of them overcharge before you notice it. You're not going to. It's not worth it. You can't hire a lawyer. You can't even the filing fees. It's insane. No one can do that. No lawyer would represent you unless you have a class, unless you can be certified as a class. Because now what ends up happening is that this company, which has ripped off a few dollars from hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, and to them, that $10 a month is $100 million. $1 billion in theory. But to each plaintiff there, it's relatively pennies by your typical litigation perspective. So you need to have 4 elements in order to be, you don't walk into court as a class. You come in there, and the attorneys, when they draft the complaint, they will assert in there that they're asking the court to certify a class. What does it mean for it to be certified as a class? Because you can't just walk in there and say, hey, I got millions of people behind me. No. You come in there with your lead plaintiff, and you need to establish that this is the type of case that under American law, you're allowed to be certified as a class. The certification process can take weeks, months, years in theory. Usually not years. Usually it takes months. Let's assume. In order to qualify, you have to show a few things. You have to show numerosity. If there's too many people, you can't possibly depose 1 million people who are all victims $7 at a time. Or $10 at a time. So you have to have too numerous. What is too numerous? Is that a few dozen? Is that 100? The smaller classes usually would be for, they each lost out $1,000 at a time. Something like that. You could have smaller classes too. But once you start getting beyond a few dozen people, you likely have an opportunity, potential to be certified as a class. You need to have numerosity. You have to have typicality, meaning that everyone here has the same basic story, not identical story, but basic story. That there's certain facts that we can say these facts, which create the basis of a legitimate claim, are typical of everyone in the class. These specific facts. So each of these people in the AT&T case I gave you, each of these people were customers of AT&T during this period and purchased this service. And it was there could be other factors that they would throw in there in order to say these are the typical elements that everyone needs to have. You need to have a lead plaintiff who's representative of that typicality, because that person can be deposed. They're not deposing 1 million people. They're not going to get the facts about 1 million people. You also need to have adequate representation, meaning that the attorneys who are handling this case are attorneys who are seasoned professionals at handling class action suits, because there's a lot of different steps you have to go through when you are a counsel in a class action suit. You have to send out notice to the public so that people know that, hey, you can jump into this suit and become part of the class. But in order for all this to happen, the class has to be certified by the judge, and the judge has to do his or her due diligence to ensure that this is a properly certifiable class and to explain what parameters fit within that whole typicality. What is going to establish that someone properly is in this class versus someone whose facts are, they were also damaged by AT&T, but in another way, which is not fitting within this class. So class certification, it might require an evidentiary hearing. There's a lot of steps that can happen before you get to certification. And it only becomes certified once the judge says, class certified. And even once it's certified, there are certain conditions subsequent that have to be met by the attorneys who are handling it. I've never been part of a firm that handles class action. I have referred some cases for class action. I learned enough in law school to remember enough about what class action is and had enough dealings with it with other attorneys who do class action for a living that I've had enough refreshers on it that I could present this in a way that I hope was sufficiently digestible to each of you. How does class action come up in the context of this ruling? Well, the majority allows for a judge to certify a class and say, oh, okay, if you have a whole class of people, then this judge could, in theory, offer universal relief, because class action suits, unlike a trip and fall case, unlike other types of relief that people might be seeking, class action suits will frequently cover people from across the country, if not across the globe. And the clever ones among you are starting to see where this may be going. Because all of a sudden, the locality of this courthouse and this judge's jurisdiction gets expanded greatly in a class action suit. Where all of a sudden now this judge and this courthouse is able to help implement and decide justice for someone who's living across the country 2,000 miles away. And what the court in the majority here left open was that if in fact there's an order that is issued by President Trump and there's a class action suit brought by a plaintiff, well then it wouldn't be a universal injunction, that'd be class action, and that is something that the judge would have authority to go beyond the normal brick and mortar structure of his jurisdiction and extend a TRO across the entire country, if not the world, under this class action theory. The problem with them leaving this loophole open is that we have seen judges employ this method already, but they don't just employ it. They use it as a weapon. We saw Judge Boasberg in D.C., where he's certifying a class that he says everyone who might be affected by this TRO is in the class. That's ridiculous. So he's pretending now that it's a class action, normal class action. There's a whole lengthy process to figure out how do you certify the class. You need to have typicality, that everyone here has certain key factors which makes this class definable. And the fear that Justices Thomas and Alito have, as well as myself, is that we will see judges that will claim that they're acting under the umbrella of, oh, well, I'm making this a class action suit, and since it's a class action suit, now I have jurisdiction all the way across the country, and I could start implementing this TRO for anyone who's in this class, that I'm just making up what this class is without going through the normal procedures that any other class action suit that would ever come in front of them would have to go through. That's the problem. So the problem is there's this big truck-sized loophole that we have to be concerned judges are going to come roaring on through. These activist judges are going to come roaring on through that massive loophole that this majority gave them. That's the downside. And then the reason it's not just a concern, we've seen it happen already. So this is not just like maybe this is going to happen. We've seen it be done before this Cass decision came down. So we saw Judge Boasberg doing it. We certainly should anticipate that he will do it again, and that other judges similar to him will likely try to do the same thing of claiming, I've got a class here, as a way of loopholing around this decision from the Supreme Court. But certainly there are some judges who are not, even activist judges, you'd like to think some of them are sufficiently respectful of their duties as judges that they're not going to go roaring on through. So this will stop some people. It will. I don't want to say that it's not going to have any impact. It will have an impact. But is that loophole should be something of a concern. I hope that was clear to all of you. I'm going to go through the impact of this decision and what all of the impacts of this decision. There's a fellow on X goes by Rod Martin who did a great breakdown of the potential benefits of this outside of universal injunctions of this decision, which there are several. I'm going to go through that with you, as well as going through various cases which right now are under a universal injunction that can promptly be lifted. So before I get to that, let me get to chats that are hanging out there. So do you think KJB got this? Jackson's got this one. Punitive classes are the current workaround for completing full class certification, which should take weeks or months. What legal basis gives punitive classes? I think you mean putative classes, not punitive. Putative. P-U-T-A. T-I-V. Well, you can say that if members of the class are being affected improperly, in that case, you could theoretically issue an injunction for them. Other ways that they will abuse rulings are associations and states suing as no class certification needed to get wide relief. This is true. This is true. But then they need standing, and they may not always be able to get standing. Some cases they have standing. Some cases they don't. How are they going to send notice to class of TDA gang banners? Could help Trump find them. That would be awesome. Show me on a dial where AT&T hurt you. Don't get me started on AT&T. Don't get me started. Okay, so let's check out this thread here from Rod D. Martin. On the last day of its term, the Supreme Court struck down the abuse of nationwide injunctions, restoring separation of powers and ending a major weapon used to paralyze Trump's presidency. Here's why it matters. This morning, I wrote an entire deep dive on this. It's important. I even made it free for readers. You should check it out, but the thread has key highlights. So, for years, radical district judges, usually in deep blue jurisdictions, have issued sweeping rulings blocking entire federal policies nationwide. Not just for the plaintiff, not just in the district, for everyone, everywhere. It's unconstitutional. It ends now. I don't know that it really ends now. This guy's not a lawyer, so maybe that's why he thinks it ends now. He did some good work here. Maybe that's why he thinks it ends now. In Trump v. Cass, Justice Amy Coney Barrett delivered the 6-3 ruling, quote, when a court concludes the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power to. Well said. Well said. And Justice Barrett torched Justice Jackson's dissent. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. And she also wrote here, no one disputes that the executive has a duty to follow the law, but the judiciary does not have unbridled authority to enforce this obligation. In fact, sometimes the law prohibits the judiciary from doing so. What she wrote was, if courts do not have the authority to require the executive to adhere to law universally, compliance with law sometimes becomes a matter of executive prerogative. So, observing the limits on her judicial authority, including, as relevant here, the boundaries of the Judiciary Act of 1789, is required by a judge's oath to follow the law. You have to follow the law. You can't just start writing your own law, Justice Jackson. But she skips over that part because analyzing the governing statute involves boring legalese. Unbelievable. She seeks to answer a far more basic question of enormous practical significance. May a federal court in the United States of America order the executive to follow the law? In other words, it's unnecessary to consider whether Congress has constrained the judiciary. What matters is how the judiciary may constrain the executive. Justice Jackson would do well to heed her own admonition. Everyone from the president on down is bound by the law. That goes for judges too. Woo! Why does it matter? Because Trump received more nationwide injunctions than all other presidents combined, not to ensure justice, to block every policy the voters chose, immigration, deregulation, even personnel decisions. This wasn't judicial review. This was individual activist judges usurping the entire executive branch. It's not checks and balances. It's a deep state veto. It also goes far beyond the Constitution, the Judiciary Act's limits. Judges must rule on the case and the parties in front of them, not everyone everywhere. Only Supreme Court has nationwide jurisdiction. And they just said so. As Justice Kavanaugh wrote, in justiciable cases, this court, not the district courts, will be the ultimate decision maker on major federal actions. Yeah, we'll see if that's true with the loopholes you left them. But what I really want to get to, what he's saying here is this ruling is part of a counter-revolution restoring constitutional limits. Jarksy neutered unconstitutional agency prosecutions. Dobbs returned abortions to the states. CASA ends nationwide injunction abuse. See, I think he's a little too excited here. And this is probably why he has 200,000 followers, because he knows how to, like, basically do the hyperbole. I find that I'm really terrible at the hyperbole here. Perhaps that's why I don't know. Maybe that's why I don't catch lightning in a bottle the way Rod Martin does. He writes well. It's catchy. And for the most part, you know, I agree with what he wrote here. But I'm going to give you the facts as I see them. What he did really well was this here. The top 6 policies affected by the Supreme Court's crackdown on nationwide injunctions. So these are 6 cases that are now currently under a universal injunction. Now, I want to be clear with you so you understand the ramifications of this particular decision. Just because universal injunctions are no longer legal does not mean that the universal injunction that was entered last week, last month, or 3 months ago just dissolves and goes away. That's not the way this works. That is not the way this works. In order for any existing universal injunction to be ground into pulp and blown away, you actually need to go back to the judge that issued it. And you need to say to that judge, because of the decision in Trump v. CASA, they effectively ruled that the universal injunction you put in this case, this separate case, was beyond that the court here exceeded its authority, and accordingly, we are asking this court now via motion. We're going to bring a motion to this court saying, remember this universal injunction you ordered 2 months ago that stopped us from defunding USAID? Remember this universal injunction you passed, which stopped us from deporting people? Remember this universal injunction you passed, which said that Trump couldn't do X, Y, Z? We're asking you now, considering the fact that the court said you can't do it, to take out this injunction. Or have it apply simply to the plaintiffs here, but not to anyone else. Because that's what the Supreme Court capped the extent of your authority, and your current order that's still in effect violates this ruling from the Supreme Court. But you need to go back to each case and say, hey, here's Trump v. CASA. Read it. That's what you got to do. They don't just go away on their own. They're still there. The order stands there. When an order goes up there, people ignore the thought process that went into the order. They're just like, well, that's the rule. That's the rule. That's the last decision from the court. So that's still there. The underpinning behind it, the logic that went into that all gets forgotten about. Much like we've seen with prosecutors, like in the Diddy case, which is in deliberation now. I see him having problems with Rumble. I got a notification here from StreamYard that they're having a problem. So it's a Rumble problem. It's not. If you come over here, I'm sorry. I'm going to type into there. This is a Rumble problem. So I don't know if it's going to fix or not, but it says we're having trouble streaming to your destination. We'll keep trying to let you know if it's resolved. If this continues for a few minutes, try creating a new stream. All right. I don't know what to tell you. So the status is that the logic behind it gets forgotten, much like a prosecutor who has a criminal statute, which makes something a crime and has elements to that crime. And then the logic behind why that statute got passed becomes irrelevant. And prosecutors, like they do with 18 U.S.C. 1591 or with RICO, they ignore the fact that RICO is designed to stop people from making money. That's what the whole purpose is. And they're like, well, it says if you do this a long period of time and you have multiple crimes, and then that's a RICO violation. But RICO is supposed to stop people from trying to extort and make money, and Diddy's using it to waste money. Like, that's not what the statute was ever for. The law doesn't care about what the logic behind the law was. It's just, this is what's there. Similarly, this is the law right now. There's universal injunction. That's the law. The logic behind it, whether or not they're allowed to do universal injunctions, all that other stuff, that doesn't matter. But, you can go back to the court and say, hey, you got this standing universal injunction out there. And that's not legal. That was beyond your authority. So we're asking you to review what you did here, reassess, and fix this so it's not a universal injunction anymore. And you can leave it applying to the individual plaintiffs who are here in this case, but everyone else, not covered. They got to sue for themselves. They got to find their own relief. And hopefully many of the judges will undo it. I'm just letting you know that until the DOJ goes through these steps, those UIs, universal injunctions, will remain in effect. Now, but these are 6 policies that were affected by the Supreme Court's crackdown on nationwide injunctions. So here we go. Number 1, defunding sanctuary cities. Federal judges blocked Trump from cutting off funds to cities that harbor illegal aliens. No more. Thanks to SCOTUS, Trump can now strip funding from any city that refuses to enforce federal law, just like the Constitution requires. Well, there might be an exception for states. So I don't know about that. I don't know about that, Rod. Not sure about that one. Voter ID and citizenship verification. Again, this could be a state loophole. Trump's order requiring voter ID and proof of citizenship was blocked by liberal judges in Massachusetts and Washington. That's done now. I'm not sure about that, Rod, because states seem to be able to get universal injunctions. Trump can now enforce election integrity nationwide. No judge can override with a stroke of a pen. Each state would likely have to come, but it could work for the entire state probably. $3 trillion federal funding freeze. Trump tried to pause $3 trillion federal spending for review. 23 states sued. Judges blocked it. Again, there seems to be a state exception. So I don't know about that one either. I don't know about that one. I'm trying to be real with you. I'd love to give you like great news. I love giving you great news. But this one could work though. Trump's education department ordered a halt to DEI indoctrination in public schools or lose $75 billion in federal funding. Activist judges in Maryland, New Hampshire, and Washington blocked it. Not anymore. The ruling restores Trump's authority to defund woke education. Maybe, unless it was brought by the states. I don't remember. It's so confusing going back over the history with all these different TROs that were granted. Ban on taxpayer-funded trans surgeries for kids. This sounds like, I don't think this is a state one. Trump's January 28th order banned federal funds for child sex transitions. A Baltimore judge tried to stop it. This new SCOTUS decision gives Trump the green light to end taxpayer-funded trans surgeries on minors for good. This one I think is likely true. I don't think this was a state one. This doesn't feel like a state thing. So, yeah. And shutting down USAID, that was also individual corporations which sued. That was not a state thing. So, yeah, I think he can shut down USAID aside from, the amounts needed for the plaintiffs in that particular case. So, there you go. That's my breakdown for you on that. That is my breakdown on that. I want to focus on what Amy Coney Barrett wrote about Justice Jackson in this case. Because some of this is great. It's a long decision. It's 119 pages. I'm not going through the whole thing. But let's focus on some of the juicier parts. Where Rule 23 is say you can do injunctions and TROs before certification of the class for... I didn't say before certification. That's the point. I didn't say before. You can't do it before. You can't. My point is that they'll just say class certified. It normally is something that's supposed to take weeks or months. And I'm saying that Judge Boasberg basically he did it in minutes. He's like, okay, I'm certifying a class right now, or issuing a TRO. They just showed up here with a TRO. I'm certifying the class, and I'm issuing a TRO. That's what we saw him do. I agree with you. Philosophically, principally, and Judge Boasberg did not do it before certifying the class. He just decided he just said we're certifying right here and now. Principal dissent focuses on conventional legal terrain like the Judiciary Act of 1789 in our cases on equity. Justice Jackson, however, chooses. So that's the principal dissent. That's talking about Kagan and Sotomayor. Jackson, however, chooses a starting line of attack that is tethered neither to these sources nor, frankly, to any doctrine whatsoever. We're basically calling Justice Jackson untethered, waving away attention to the limits on judicial power as mind-numbingly technical query. Oh my God, that is great. She offers a vision of the judicial role that would make even the most ardent defender of judicial supremacy blush. In her telling, the fundamental role of courts is to order everyone, including the president, to follow the law, full stop. Okay, let me find the full stop. I got to find whether she really says stop. Let's find stop. Let's find the word. Let's see if we find full stop. 3 times we have full stop. Here's one. It's like she's like in high school. How did she get this job? How did you get this job? Accordingly, and for that to actually happen, courts must have the power to order everyone, including the executive, to follow the law. Full stop. Wow, you're an embarrassment. Wow, you're how humiliating for you. Getting back to Justice Barrett here. The function of courts, both in theory and practice, necessarily includes announcing what the law requires in suits for the benefit of all who are protected by the Constitution, not merely doling out relief to injured private parties. And she warns, if courts lack the power to require the executive to adhere to law universally, courts will leave a gash in the basic tenets of our founding charter that would turn out to be a mortal wound. She thought that she was writing so well here. Oh, we're so proud of you. Look at you. All right, isn't this so poetic? Oh, she's stopping a gash in the basic tenets of our founding charter. Rhetoric aside, Jackson's position is difficult to pin down. She might be arguing that universal injunctions are appropriate, even required whenever the defendant is part of the executive branch. If so, her position goes far beyond the mainstream defense of universal injunctions. We don't know in other words, we don't know what the hell she's saying. By the way, I'm back up on Rumble now, so that's good. Yeah, you are live on Rumble. think. Should be. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're good. We're good on Rumble now. Remember the AEA case from Texas? They made it to SCOTUS in record time. It was putative class. SCOTUS gave relief. Yeah, but the point is he made a class. My problem is that he made a class right away. Instead of going through the normal procedure for making a class. So why do we say you shouldn't do this all the time? Because there's a general principle. The nationwide injunctions come with significant costs and should never be the default remedy in cases challenging federal executive action. As best we can tell, though, her argument is more extreme still. Let's see how crazy. You want to know how crazy this woman is? We have to sit with her every day. We have to have lunch with this woman. Justice Jackson appears to believe that the reason behind any court order demands universal adherence, at least where the executive is concerned. Unbelievable. Astonishing. In her law-declaring vision of the judicial function, a district court's opinion is not just persuasive, but has the legal force of a judgment. Which is inconsistent with what we wrote in 2023, that a federal court's judgment, not its opinion, remedies an injury. Once a single district court deems executive conduct unlawful, it has stated what the law requires, according to her. And the executive must conform to that view, ceasing its enforcement of the law against anyone, anywhere. We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent. Not to mention the Constitution itself. Maybe she should read it. Crazy biatch. We observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. Very well written. No one disputes that the executive is due to follow the law. But the judiciary does not have unbridled authority to enforce this obligation. In fact, sometimes the law prohibits the judiciary from doing so. But see Jackson in her dissent saying, of course, now the authority to require the executive to adhere to law universally, compliance with the law sometimes becomes a matter of executive prerogative. No, it's not the law. That's the point. It only becomes the law. It's not the law yet. That's the point, idiot. She's so stupid. Compliance with laws. It's not, okay, it becomes an order. It's not compliance with the law. The law hasn't been determined yet. Observing the limits of judicial authority, including, as relevant here, the boundaries of the Judiciary Act of 1789, is required by a judge's oath to follow the law. You got to follow the law, lady, is what Amy Coney Barrett is saying. Justice Jackson skips over that part because analyzing the governing statute involves boring legalese. You could tell that she was really bothered by the phrase legalese that Justice Jackson said. She didn't refer to it as boring legalese, but she does say legalese. It's another time she says it. This is where she says it. But that legalese is a smokescreen. The Judiciary Act is legalese. You're an incompetent idiot. She should be impeached under the 25th. Utterly incompetent. Saying that may the federal court in the United States of America order the executive to follow the law in their jurisdiction, idiot. God, I hate this woman. She seeks to answer a far more basic question of enormous practical significance. May a federal court in the United States of America or executive follow the law. In other words, it's unnecessary to consider whether Congress has constrained the judiciary. We don't need to worry about what our limits are. What matters is how the judiciary may constrain the executive. Justice Jackson would do well to heed her own admission. Everyone from the president on down is bound by the law. That goes for judges too, crazy woman. Let's see this little footnote here. So what was this on 17? And she was saying, the executive must conform to that view, ceasing its enforcement. According to Justice Jackson, Justice Jackson wrote, the executive must conform to that view of the law, ceasing its enforcement of the law against anyone, anywhere. So Barrett writes, think about what this position means from Justice Jackson. If a judge in the District of Alaska holds that a criminal statute is unconstitutional, can the United States prosecute a defendant under the statute in the District of Maryland? Perhaps Justice Jackson would instinctively say yes. It's hard to imagine anyone saying no. We're still not sure because we're not sure she's human. Or that. But why, on Justice Jackson's logic, does it not violate the rule of law for the executive to initiate a prosecution elsewhere? Good question, Amy. This only applies to the president. Idiot. Partisan hack. Loser. Among its many problems, Justice Jackson's view is at odds with our system of divided judicial authority. It is also a considerable tension with the reality that district court opinions lack precedential force even vis-a-vis other judges in the same judicial district. Meaning, you don't even have any influence over someone sitting in a courtroom next to you and you think you're outweighing the president of the United States. Like, get over yourself, woman. Get over yourself. Understand where your lane is, because you are clueless. Justice Jackson's living in Lululand. What a lunatic. So yes, overall, good decision. Very far from being perfect because of the big loopholes that I spent a while walking you through where those loopholes are. But overall, at the very least, for some judges, maybe not the Boasbergs of the world, but some of the activist judges even you think will be somewhat impeded from just running out there and signing off these universal injunctions. Hopefully. And at the very least, if they do a crap job in certification, then that's another avenue of attack for Trump. And this is another side benefit, which I should point out, that if they do a crap job on the certification, you can appeal on the basis saying this is not a class. There's no class here. And here are all the laws under class theory as to why it is that this is not a valid class. So undo the class, undo the universal injunction. This is no authority without the class. So it gives another line of attack for the Trump administration to try and strike back at these insane activist judges. That's what I got for you tonight, my friends. That's what I got for you. What do you think? Streamweaver says members of class action don't get anything. We are plebes. This is true. You are all plebes. This is definitely true. Texas case didn't have a certified class. Which one was the Texas? You don't have to super chat. Which one was the Texas case? The unborn, the certified class of unborn babies. That's funny. Is that the Trinidad case? Allegan? Oh, that's so sweet. You're welcome. I hope I was clear with that whole class action thing. I really wanted to make sure that everyone can understand it because it's a very complicated area of law and I wanted you to understand. I wanted you all to really understand why there's a hole here. Oh, is that the birthright citizenship case? That's true. Oh, that's what your point is, that the CASA case is not a class. That's true. That's true. That's a good point. Like the CASA case itself. All right, my friends. Time to put your trays back in the upright and locked positions as I'm heading in for a landing now. I thank you all for joining me. I hope that none of you ate any of that lab meat, because that's not meant for you. It's not. I looked into this. It's not meant for you. It's for they, them. It's not for you. And do not, under any circumstances, ever, ever, ever eat the bugs. I don't care if they're covered in chocolate. No, don't eat the bugs. Don't do it. Don't do it. Thank you all. Good night. Godspeed.